morning. I wanted to quick thanks to Mavis and Lee for the invitation. Very glad to be here with y'all this morning, and thank y'all for making the trip to Tuscaloosa. As Ahmad had mentioned, that consumer spending is important to getting the economy back on track. So if you have time today, go out and see Tuscaloosa, spend some of your dollars. We've got some great restaurants, some great souvenir shops. There's a museum right behind us. Be careful where you walk. As they say nowadays, you can't trip in Tuscaloosa without knocking over a championship trophy. And no, when they replace it, we will not count that as the 15th national championship. Tempting as that may be. My name is Mike Brooks. I'm with the Alabama International Trade Center. The Trade Center was one of the first university-based international trade assistance organizations in the U.S. I think our friends over at Georgia and up at Rutgers beat us by a few months. We work with small and medium-sized businesses in the state of Alabama to help them with any kind of international business. Most of the folks we work with are interested in exporting, but about 20% of our clients are importers. We're part of a statewide network that focuses on domestic business as well. It's a small business development center network, and we do have locations throughout the state, most of the four-year colleges, even in Lee County. The Trade Center is unique in that, well, the domestic folks, they handle everything obviously on the domestic side. So they would probably be working with, if you've got a sawmill that needed financing, or that needed capital for a new saw, or a trucking company that is trying to buy a new truck, or any other kind of small business issue, whether it's a HR or on the finance side or marketing management. That's really where they plug in. And the Trade Center is unique. We've concentrated all the international expertise at one location here in Tuscaloosa, but we do cover the entire state. Although when I do head to Southwest Alabama, I don't take the university vehicles. I get some dirty looks. Now the Trade Center, because we're a relatively small organization, we have partnered with several of the other folks in the state that help with export promotion. Alabama Development Office, or Department of Commerce now, the major chambers of commerce, the U.S. Commercial Service, and a few other trade promotion organizations in the state. And I have to tell you that if you're a company in Alabama that's interested in import-export, you're in a really great spot, because we've got this Export Alabama community. And in other states, the different players, they don't get along, and they're very territorial, and there's no cooperation. And this is a team where we get together multiple times a year. We have a trade strategy for the entire state that we work with the governor on, we work with all the economic developers on, to get everyone playing from the same playbook, from the same plan. So I'll cover a few things in this presentation. First, just some comments on international business, and then later on a few other trade stats on where Alabama forest products are going. But it's great that I'm the third speaker now to talk about international trade, because when I started, I was usually the only person, and that's when there was a yawn, let's go get coffee right now, because international, we don't need that. So it's great, and it's really refreshing to see that I'm number 3, and I'm lucky that I don't think I'll step on anyone else's presentation, and you won't hear anything twice, other than China. So I hear excuses all the time. There are excuses for not exporting, and there are legitimate reasons. Sometimes it's a strategic business decision not to get into international trade. We hear all the time that, well, we're too small, or we got burned in the past, or my favorite, everybody I know lost their shirt in exporting. Now, we do have a triathlon going on out in Tuscaloosa, so you might see some shirtless folks running around, but they're not exporters. Getting paid is a problem. People worry about foreign language proficiency, paperwork, but really the main thing is fear of the unknown. And if you haven't exported anything, if you haven't gone through that process before, there's some real concerns there. If you sell your product to a processor across state line Mississippi and they don't pay, then you can get the truck drive over, and or you call the DA, or you call the right people, and you can get that taken care of. But if your customer's in Shanghai and all of a sudden that payment doesn't come through, then what? And there are ways to mitigate risk. There are ways to make sure that everything works smoothly, but like anything, it takes a little bit of preparation to get everything set up the right way. A handful of myths on exporting. People think that it's easy, or people think that it's difficult. Like most things in life, anything that is going to work well takes some time and preparation, effort and resources, commitment. Just a quick example, this is not something that you can do overnight. I had somebody call me last week. It was an agricultural company in North Alabama, and they said, well, we've got harvest coming up in about 3 or 4 weeks. Can you help me export that by the end of the month? No. Profit margins are larger. Well, that's not necessarily true. They can be larger if you've got a product that unique or on the cutting edge or is in limited supply. But I think since here we're dealing with mainly commodity products, I don't think you're going to necessarily find larger margins. Can anyone export? Well, for the most part, yes. If you're willing to take a little bit of time to figure things out and work with some of the organizations in the state that can help you, there's certainly no reason that you can't do it. I've already hit on that. Resources, commitment, and making sure you have a competitive product. Now, one of the benefits there tends to be greater profitability over time. It doesn't happen overnight. Just like if you're growing a market in the U.S., you might start with Alabama and move to Mississippi and then move over to Georgia, grow in the Southeast, and then finally make the Northeast, etc. It takes time to develop an export market, and they're all a little bit different. Each country with its own rules and regulations, and you have to be able to figure out transportation costs and everything that goes into getting your product from point A to point B, and getting the money from point B back to point A. One of the cautionary tales that when we're out on the road trying to talk with our small businesses about the benefits of exporting is I think I've got a slide later on, but we worked with a sawmill in South Alabama that the factory had burned down, and we worked with the owners to get an SBA loan. They bought new equipment, they reopened, and they've got about 70 or 80% of their sales are export sales. And while we were down there, we said, well, let's go talk to other competitors straight down the road and talk to them about exporting. They said, no, we don't need that. We've got plenty enough sales right here in the United States. And, that was 2005. After the internet boom, things were still trucking along quite well. And then, of course, the domestic market has sort of tanked in construction industry and housing. We're not there, and that other business is no longer in business. Whereas the exporter, while they've seen better days and they're struggling, they're still around. Well, recession proofing, I'm not sure that counts, but all right, now I'm going to go through a few stats. We covered a little bit of this earlier. We'll get into a little bit more depth. A disclaimer, I'm not a forest products expert, but I do have incredible resources back at the office. Any questions I can't answer today, let me know. We're fast and free. So anything I can answer today, I'd be glad to get to you by Monday afternoon. I'm going to start with the U.S. and just look at where lumber products are going right now, and then drill down to Alabama to see where we're at. So softwood lumber exports in the U.S., most of the slides here we're looking at the last 5 years, just because we've seen some pretty significant changes in the last 5 years. From 2007 to 2011, we're up over $1 billion. Now, back in 2007, the largest chunk of U.S. exports for softwood were in our own backyard, North America and the Caribbean, Canada, Mexico. And you'll notice 5 years later, what happens to Asia? Pac-Man. Over 50% of U.S. softwood exports now going to Asia, and a correspondingly smaller chunk of the pie in North America and the Caribbean. Even though there's still strong markets for us, volume-wise or dollar value, this is where they're going. Speaking of China, if you look at U.S. softwood exports, China is consuming about a fourth of all softwood exports from the U.S. Now, companies that call me up all the time and say, I want to get into exporting, and the first thing they say is, I want to go to China. And well, China is an incredible booming market right now, but if you're brand new to export, that's usually not the first one that we recommend. That's like saying, I just got a learner's permit for my car and I'd really like a Ferrari. Maybe we should start with a Corolla, work our way up. China is a difficult market. There are more barriers there, beyond language and distance and logistics. You also have some cultural issues to deal with. And from a cultural standpoint, the transaction is not like in the U.S. we can pick up the phone and say, I've got product X, I'm selling it for price Y, how much do you want? And it doesn't work that way in China and other parts of Asia. You have to develop a personal relationship, and many times that doesn't always work via phone and email. If you're selling in Europe, that's great. The Germans love it. You can be bottom line with them, that's all they want. They're like, oh, what was your name again? No, never mind, I'll send you the check. Hardwood, U.S. exports. About $1.5 billion. We had, of course, with the recession, a nice dip, and we're recovering well. In 2007, it was about evenly split. It was about 30% split between Asia, North America, and Europe. Pac-Man again. Pretty significant change there. The higher value hardwood products headed over to Asia. And no surprise here, China in particular. 35% of U.S. hardwood exports are going to China. Now, looking specifically at Alabama, because obviously when we're looking at the U.S. stats, our friends in the Pacific Northwest, West Coast, and even the Northeast, that's all included. So in many ways, they've got the logistical advantage of getting over to the eastern ports in Asia. So Alabama softwood products, really run the last 5 years. A little dip in 2011, $91 million. And the majority of that is going to the Caribbean. I had a 2007 slide, but it's virtually identical. The major difference is that after the earthquake in Haiti, significant growth there, primarily funded through the United States and other aid and outreach organizations. The exports to Haiti were incredible. It was a 565% increase over this 5-year period, but they have dropped off in 2011. Not dropped off, but they've decreased somewhat. And we expect that to continue, but on a slow decline. Alabama hardwood exports, $31 million, and they've done a little bit better, 59% increase over the last 5 years. And as we've seen before, Alabama as a whole, the exports have been pretty phenomenal. There's a national export initiative announced a few years ago where the president wanted to, was it double exports in 10 years? This is one of those things where the way that we've been growing it, it's natural. I think we're going to get there regardless. From a political standpoint, I guess that's somebody can check the boxes. Anyway, hardwood lumber in 2007, Europe was the primary consumer, and 5 years later, still a major customer, but not to beat this anymore. We've got new customers on the other side of the planet. So a quick glance at some of the export markets, and I can provide a lot more detail later. Really, there's so many segments to the forestry industry. I've got an entire report on it, but we could look at beyond hardwood and softwood specific species and let you know, where is loblolly going versus ponderosa versus cypress versus etc. But these are just sort of a high-level view. Obviously, again, earthquakes are evidently pretty good for the forestry industry. I've got several clients that are in the pole and piling business, and they really hate hurricanes. They get really concerned at hurricane season. Not to make light of the situation, but the reality, it's a business opportunity. After the humanitarian side's been taken care of, there's opportunity for us to help them with the rebuilding process. Housing is growing in Japan. A lot of that's government driven. A lot of the reconstruction that's happening is not directly on the coast. People are building a little further away from the coast, up in the mountains as well. A good portion of that, we'll see in a second, is wood stick construction and not necessarily cinder block, etc. China housing market is booming. However, their government pretty much dictates how much housing there's going to be and how fast it will grow. They do have certain banking regulations, and the number of home buyers are limited. It might be a phenomenal market with 1 billion people, but only a certain segment of that population is actually going to be able to go out and buy or build a home. Looking at housing starts in the United States versus housing starts in Japan. And Japan is in the red color there, the U.S. in blue. Where the U.S. has dropped off significantly between 07 and 09. You see it's slowly starting to come back. Whereas Japan did not have as big a drop-off, and right now is a bigger market for housing starts. In 2010, 55% of the starts were wood frame. This was just for comparison purposes. Again, China looking at their log imports. With trade regulations and such, there's decreasing competition from Russia, which is a good thing because they're a huge supplier to that market. But it's opened up the door for several of the competitors, including the United States, to be able to step in. We already mentioned Haiti, and then the other major players in the Caribbean, Dominican Republic, Jamaica, the Leeward Windward Islands, and primarily Trinidad. This is just a quick snapshot, because someone had asked me earlier about what's going from Mobile. This is not necessarily the port of Mobile, but this is the Mobile Customs District. And the Department of Census sets it up so that there are customs districts. The District of Mobile includes everything from Pascagoula over to, I think, Pensacola even. But it falls into the top 10 as far as HS Code 44 goes with exported wood products. To wrap up, I think one of the things I have to mention is companies that are interested in exporting, and if y'all are the landowners, it might not be y'all, but it might be the companies that you work with, the people that you sell to, and you're trying to get them pointed in the right direction. I'd say the number one thing as far as being successful in exporting is having a solid domestic business. Because if you're already on the precipice and you're sliding downward quickly domestically, then getting into export is probably the last thing you want to do. Because if you can't manage what's going on with your local customers, throwing in the export wrench is really probably just going to make things worse. And number two is having a competitive product. Owner commitment from budget and staff is number three. Many times we'll find a company who's got that salesperson that is just gung-ho and ready to conquer the world, but the CEO says, we're not doing that. And if you've got that kind of fight going on internally, it's not going to help you in the long run. An export plan strategy everybody buys into. And finally, building an export team inside and outside your firm. Because you don't have to be an expert in all things import-export to be able to succeed, but it helps if you know the people that do know all of the details. And that's where we recommend working with folks like the International Trade Center, Alabama Development Office, etc., and then working with other folks with logistics, the right kind of bankers, sales, shipping, management, to help you fill in the blanks. I've mentioned this before, the Trade Center, the primary three things that we do are export market research, export training, and export financing. And we try to plug in wherever we're needed. We work with companies that range from the high-tech missile defense people in Huntsville that can spot license plates on terrorists from a satellite, to the shrimpers down in Bayou Battery, to a cookie company in Birmingham, and innumerable number of forest product companies throughout the state. We do a team training program, try to bring everybody up to speed. We're looking for a long-term commitment so that the companies we work with know that we're going to be there, and it's not just a, hi, we're here to help, okay, see you later. We're looking for long-term commitment to make sure that the companies succeed. On financing, we try to work with folks that need help on SBA loans, Exim Bank, certain USDA programs and others to try to fit in. We've got two retired, or I call them recovering bankers, that help all the companies we work with, and they really know the ins and outs of this. Thomasville Lumber is one of the companies we worked with. The small business person here in 2007. That was the company I mentioned earlier that helped get them back up and running. We mentioned earlier boat building. This company down by the Battery sends these crew boats over to Nigeria to service the oil industry over there. And in Birmingham or Irondale, we've got a company called Bucker Powder. They do this great, I'll call it like a pixie stick, but don't tell them I said that because they shoot me. But it's a special candy dispenser. You can see it at the Birmingham Zoo and a few other places. But just an example of some of the companies that we work with. If y'all have any questions, I'll do my best. We had some good ones earlier. I think I should have brought some more stats or more slides with me as backup. But if y'all have any questions, feel free to call or email anytime. Thank y'all.